We are here with Zach Buchanan from The Athletic. You are here with Five Reasons Sports Network once again talking baseball. And there's so much we want to know. But first of all, Zach, tell us, what did everything mean? What happened yesterday? The whole agreement. First, the players they turned down the proposal, but then they agree to what the commissioners established. What's the end game here?
I'm not sure we know yet. So much is left to be determined. And my understanding is that the players have basically said, look, we're not going to come to a negotiated agreement that's different from the one we had in March. So that leaves the commissioner the ability to set a schedule of his choice as long as the players get prorated play. And it sounds like just from reports out there that he's going to do a 60-game schedule. And I'm sure the players will file a grievance saying that the league diddle-daddled around during negotiations over the last couple of months, and they could have wound up playing more games. And so the grievance seems to have been the end game for the players, which could, if they win it, win them close to $1 billion in salary concessions, I think, is what is the number that's been tossed about. So we're going to have baseball, assuming that they can figure out health and safety protocols, assuming that players can report to spring training on time, assuming that coronavirus doesn't get everybody sick and cancel everything. But if anything, we've kicked a can down the road on a labor battle, both with this grievance and with the new CBA, which will be renegotiated after the 2021 season.
So this is, let's say, baseball Infinity War, and we're waiting for the second movie next year, and that's going to be a bloodbath.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good way of thinking of it. Yeah, we haven't reached any kind of resolution yet at all.
So what, as a casual fan that's watching this right now, and let's say you want baseball to be back, but you were upset by everything that went on in the past month, what should the casual fan think about all this?
I mean, I could understand if the casual fan is a little ticked off that, all these rich people are squabbling over this stuff and depriving you of the ability to watch baseball. I think most of those people will come back. And I don't blame the league or the players for trying to get the best deal they can. They're a business and the players are workers, and they want to, both sides want to make sure that they are doing what is in their best interests. This just happens to be a very high profile business, but it's no different than any other business, a restaurant or a big box store like Best Buy, trying to figure out how to operate in this new world that we live in. So I don't blame the two sides for doing that. If anything, you can kind of fault both of them for not kind of taking the zoomed out view and saying, look, even as we're haggling over these details in the short term, the game is suffering some because it's not on TV. We could be on TV right now. But I'm not sure who you should say should take the short end of the stick to make that happen.
What can baseball learn from NASCAR, UFC, boxing, sports that have already resumed, European soccer? What can they learn from what has already started again?
Well, some of those sports that have started again, the ones in the U.S. specifically, NASCAR, boxing. Boxing involves a lot of contact, but it's only two people you have to worry about keeping healthy, really. Yeah. NASCAR, you never come into contact with the other drivers and competitors. And then in Europe, the testing and situation with COVID is just way better than it is here. It's much easier to envision being able to play soccer over there safely just because the numbers have gone down. They've bent the curve. Well, the numbers here are going right back up again. I mean, we're here in Arizona, we're having our worst numbers ever. So I think that what's different between soccer and baseball out here is just the challenge of dealing with the disease. And that's something that's out of baseball's control. They can't control how behind the U.S. has been on testing and how kind of the federal government has abdicated its responsibility with this stuff. So that it just makes it a tougher puzzle to figure out. And then compared to baseball and hockey, Major League Baseball is trying to get as much of a full season as they can rather than wrapping up a season that was almost all the way completed.
Talking about the coronavirus, and I saw by your tweets, by what you're saying now, that now at the top of the list, the virus is the main concern. The thing is, let me toss you a scenario here. Mookie Betts about to become a free agent. He's having a hell of a year. 30 games in, hitting about 450, let's say, or something like crazy like that a short season allows you to. And he feels kind of under the weather, but he's like, I'm hitting 450, I'm having a great season, I am about to be a free agent, and he refuses to be tested. Can a player do that? Can a player say like, I don't want to be tested, I want to go out and play? Or is there any kind of penalty if something like that happens?
I believe that if the health and safety protocols will be agreed on between the league and the union. So at that point, Mookie Betts in this scenario would be obligated to be tested. I don't know why a player would refuse to be tested. I mean, it's a pretty non-invasive thing, and they've talked about getting the rapid test and the I think it's even supposed to be a mouth swab, not even a nasal swab that goes up into your eyeballs and makes you cry. So I don't think that. Sorry, go ahead.
It's not the physical part of it, really. To me, it's about the fear of testing positive and being out 2 weeks and wiping out all the good things that they may have done during this short season, and then all of a sudden, players like Robby Ray, like Mookie Betts, like someone that's going into free agency, and they think, okay, all I have to do is get through these next 30 games, and then I hit free agency, and I have great numbers to show. That's more of the fear to me than a mouth swab, really.
I don't think that's as big of a deal, because I think everybody going into the season is going to recognize that the results from this 60-game season are going to be pretty hard to trust. And if you're Mookie Betts, if you're hitting 100 over these 60 games, you're going to sign a massive contract next year, because everybody knows that you're good and that 60 games is not a representative season. Same goes with Robby Ray. If Robby Ray shoves for 60 games, or if Robby Ray gets knocked around, people are going to be able to rationalize it either way and say like, oh, well, we will probably weigh, the years before 2020 more than we will weigh 2020, just because it's a weird year. Players won't have had as much time to prepare. Robby Ray as a pitcher is probably not going to be asked to go as long, just because there's going to be expanded rosters. So who knows what's going to happen, but I don't think it's going to affect free agency in terms of performance. I think the bigger effect on free agency is going to be the lingering financial effects that the owners say that they're going to be dealing with heading into next season, and that may be where they look to save some money by not spending.
You, Zach Buchanan, would you say that there is more of a likelihood that the season is completed, playoffs included, or that the season gets halted because of the coronavirus? Because Harris County in Houston, they have a 177% increase in hospitalizations right now. In Florida, there is an 88% increase, and they are probably going to become the epicenter of the virus soon. Arizona is having its own problems. So would you say it's more likely that baseball completes its season, or that it's going to encounter more problems as it goes?
If I had to guess, and this is with no special knowledge, I would guess that the season gets shut down by the virus. I think everybody's concerned about that. I think there are just too many people involved to ensure that nobody gets sick. And even if you weed out the people who get sick with daily testing, I think it's just inevitable that someone, a player, a coach, is going to end up in the hospital with this. It's a very serious disease, and we don't know enough about it to say for sure that someone like me, who is young and healthy, or like most of the players who are young and healthy, are for sure safe if we get this thing. Not to mention that, you've got coaches who are in their 60s and 70s involved, and are pretty integral to kind of what goes on in the field. So I think it's just a matter of time until someone gets really sick from this. And at that point, you have to kind of say, like, is it moral to keep playing this? If someone involved in this got sick and winds up in the hospital, should we keep playing as if this is worthwhile to push through? Or should we say, okay, no, this is too dangerous. We thought we could do it. We obviously can't. We need to stop before someone else gets sick.
But it's all about money, right? So if money is the main object, and they have to weigh this whole battle that they just had, and then they have to stop it, it's going to be harder for them to look in the mirror and say, hey, this isn't worth it, when profit seems to be all that matters?
No, I don't think we can reduce it to that much. I think it's a worthwhile goal to try and figure it out. Every other business in America is trying to figure it out. Some businesses, some restaurants are saying, look, we can't make enough money this way. We're terrified of people having back in our dining rooms and getting sick. We're going to stay closed. But I don't blame them for trying to figure out a way that this could work. I think that they just need to have that ripcord there handy, ready to grab for when it tilts into this is not worth it from a health and safety standpoint, because I think we will get there. And I think that the key to this whole scenario is being able to say, okay, here is the point where this many people get sick, where we are saying shut it down before it gets really bad. So as long as there is that point, and I don't think anybody said what that point is, I think it's worthwhile to try out.
The training camps are shut down right now, and obviously spring training sites are shut down, and there is talk of spring training starting on July 1st. Is there any talk of insurance for the players, just like the NBA has implemented career-ending injury insurance for players that are about to play in their shortened season? Is there any kind of barriers or like lifeboats, if you will, for players that that's the wrong term actually, lifeboats, but kind of something to safeguard their career? That's what I mean. Is there something in there?
I don't know. Maybe that is involved in the health and safety protocols, although agreeing to something like that, it would have required the two sides to come to an agreement rather than the commissioner implement a season on his own. I believe you will have the ability for players who are in high-risk categories with maybe some underlying health condition to opt out of the season and still get their service time. Other players should be able to opt out of the season, but they won't get paid, won't get service time, so they're basically just punting on this year. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some players do that. So, because say if you have a child that has an autoimmune disease that makes that child susceptible, would you say playing 60 games for a fraction of your normal pay is worth endangering that child? Probably not. So you probably say, you know what, I'm good. We're going to sit this one out. I'll see you guys in 2021. But I don't know about kind of just like, I think you're talking about like arm injuries and things that come with not enough time to train. And to a certain extent, the expanded rosters are intended to guard against that, so we're not leaning too much on pitchers. I think that's why the league wants to be careful not playing a lot of double headers. But I don't know if they'll carve out something specifically for baseball-related injuries.
You mentioned that you had an idea about the DH, that a team should be able to pick whether to have the DH at their ballpark or not. If they're a National League team, like you said, Bumgarner could hit for the Diamondbacks, and the Diamondbacks will have an advantage over, let's say, the Marlins, going with a normal starting pitcher. What do you think that will be viable? Or because we see that the DH is going to be full time now, it's going to be here for the foreseeable future. But do you see the National League having some kind of way to go back to the way things were, or is this a new normal?
I'm not sure if it's a new normal just yet. I mean, I think everybody's always predicted that the DH is going to come to NL at some point. But because the two sides couldn't come to an agreement, it'll only be here for 2020 because both sides agree that it'll help cut down on pitcher injuries. But I believe that it goes away for 2021 just because that's not a season that's been negotiated between the two sides. I kind of like my idea of just like throwing a wrinkle in there to add a bit of strategy to it. Because, if I'm the Diamondbacks and I haven't built my team specifically to have a DH, although they're actually pretty well set up to have it, in Madison Bumgarner's pitching, and I could mandate that the other team's pitcher hits, I'd take that scenario because I know Madison Bumgarner's a pretty good hitter, and I probably get an advantage that way, whereas as opposed to putting my ninth best hitter on the field. So I do think the league and the players, just because of all this bickering, have missed the opportunity to think of like more creative, fun ways to do a shorter season. Like we're just basically doing like a really short, non-representative version of a regular major league season with kind of different divisions than usual. But we could have had like done some really crazy playoff format instead of a regular season, or we could have come out with some other weird things to try out, just knowing like this season's just a one-off. It's not going to be representative. If anything, we're always going to put an asterisk by this season. So why not try some crazy shit But they haven't done that, and I think it's too late for them to try and do that because they spent so much time arguing over money that now you just have to play the games that are in front of you. There's no time to figure out, and certainly not time to negotiate some creative way of playing a season.
Well, with the crowds not being there, maybe an idea could be mic up everybody just like they did at the All-Star game?
Well, yes, except that that's something that was going to be included in the agreement between the players in the league in terms for in exchange for salary concessions. The players would give the owners, microphone access and an all-star game after the season and all this stuff. And that was kind of the bargaining chip. So who knows if we'll get to see that much of that because it requires the agreement of the players.
Which team do you think could surprise? I remember in 2009, the Marlins started 11-1, then they were 25-16. We're talking about a 60-game season. The Marlins would probably have made the playoffs that year if it had been a shorter season. Which team do you think can really get out really fast and surprise everybody in a way that a 162-game season wouldn't have allowed them to do?
Well, I think the thing with a season as short as 60 games is really any team can have a good 60-game stretch. I mean, is it less likely for the Pirates and the Royals and the Orioles? Absolutely. Probably not. Those guys are going to surprise you so much if they make the playoffs. But 60 games is a really short period of time. I mean, we don't feel confident voting for all-stars after 60 games because it's just not enough information to determine who's really good. But I think it benefits a team like the Diamondbacks who can get hot for a period of time. I mean, if you're looking at a 162-game season, you would say, well, the Diamondbacks, they're in the mix for the wild card, but we're not sure that they'll get through that mix. There's a lot of teams in the mix for the wild card. But right now, over 60 games, if you catch the Dodgers like for 6 games, 6 wins in 6 games, which is, not that ridiculous. I mean, you could win the division. I mean, that's the thing about the season is the teams that come out at the end of it are not necessarily going to be the best teams, and we'd also all have to make peace with that. But really, any of these teams that are like halfway decent can put together a good 60 games. Some random pitcher that was in AAA last year and is a journeyman could suddenly look like Cy Young. I mean, you get these weird stretches over 2 months.
Let's talk a bit about what's grasping the world right now, the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests, the way that kneeling has been seen in a different light throughout the past couple of weeks. What do you think baseball will do about that, since the anthem is played in literally every game and it's also a different demographic of players and fans, but for example, NASCAR has dealt with it really well?
I don't know. Baseball in its history has only had one player kneel. That was Bruce Maxwell. There wasn't like a huge backlash against it, if I remember. This was a few years ago. But it wasn't like with football where it became like a movement. And he was the only guy to do it. And he had the support of his teammates. From what I remember, he talked to them beforehand. I wouldn't be surprised if we see players kneel. And I think the league is hip to the idea that of what it's about. The other leagues the NBA was always hip to kind of what the African-American players were talking about. The NFL was not, but the NFL has come around and realized, I think, maybe half through altruism and half through just realizing that the public opinion had turned against them and they better get with the times, that players kneeling is not against the flag or against the anthem or against the military. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some baseball players kneel. We've seen a lot of more players than I would have guessed come out and say Black Lives Matter and speak on this subject. And baseball has always been a sport that discourages kind of expressions of opinions like that. And so we've seen more Black players feel comfortable talking about their experiences in outside of the game with racism. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some players kneel, and I think generally people will be supportive of it, especially with, you don't have players or fans in the stands. I can't remember the last time a regular season game that the anthem was broadcast, so I'm not sure who's going to be around to really get upset.
And which player would you think that's going to be more outspoken about it than most? Like we saw Clayton Kershaw come out and say something. We know that there are in baseball players that are not afraid to speak their minds. But who do you think will be the face of this movement for baseball? If you had to guess over over what you have seen in baseball and covering the game for so many years?
You know, that's a tough one, and I don't want to place expectations on anybody, but if I were to pick like an ideal spokesman for this, it may be a guy like Andrew McCutchen, very high-profile player, very good player, and a player who's recently been outspoken on the labor stuff, as well as, you know, the race relation stuff, as he should. But he's the guy with the kind of stature that I think that can, you know, when he does it, you have to listen to what he does. I don't know that there's a person in the game that's a bad thing to say about Andrew McCutchen. So I would look at guys like that, but I wouldn't be surprised if younger guys do it too. I mean, I think that they felt more empowered in the last few weeks to speak their mind, whereas previously, you know, if you were a rookie or something, that kind of you're pretty much told to shut up and you don't speak your mind basically until you've, you know, hit your last year before free agency or something. But I don't know who will be the first to kneel outside of Bruce Maxwell, I don't think is in the game anymore. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see several players do it.
Sounds good. And Zach, so thank you so much for your time. To finish, do you dare give me a prediction of who's going to be the National League champ, who's going to be the AL champ, who's going to win the World Series?
You know, I have no idea. Are we even going to do National League and AL just because with the division setup that they're going to do, you're going to have the NL West playing the AL West all the time? I have no idea. I mean, the Dodgers are still the most stacked team in baseball. The Yankees are probably right behind them. Everybody's had a chance to get healthy pretty much. If there are any lingering injuries, I'll probably still say we're going to see Dodgers and Yankees in the World Series. Just if I'm supposed to believe that the best teams will make it through, but it could be wacky. You know, we could be looking at the Mariners versus the Reds or something, and something we never expect.
For the audience here at 5 Reasons Sports who follow the Marlins here in Miami, what should they expect from their team? I mean, you cover the Diamondbacks, but you have seen the Marlins in the National League enough to have seen how they have progressed throughout their rebuilding.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, their farm system has gotten pretty good, I think. I mean, they're still saving like an ungodly amount of money on the Major League roster, which is unfortunate for Miami fans that they just haven't put a good product on the field. But I think some of those players, correct me if I'm wrong, are starting to come up to the majors and hit the majors. I know they had really good pitching last year. I bet they wish they still had Zach Gallen. But I think that they're getting to the point where some of those guys are hitting the majors a little bit, and if fans are really paying attention can kind of see kind of the pathway to them being good again. They're probably going to be bad again. I mean, if we're going by the history of the Marlins, most of the times they are bad. But I don't think they're as hopeless as like the Pirates or the Royals are.
Yeah, well, they have players like Brian Anderson. The player that came in the Gallen trade was just Chisholm, who was the #1 prospect for the Diamondbacks before the trade. So I agree that Zach Gallen is a potential ace in the making. But the Marlins haven't made the playoffs since 2003. But hey, they're the only undefeated team in playoff history, right? As far as never losing a series. So if they make it, you know, they're not afraid to roll through any expectations. So well, Zach, thank you so much for your time. Congratulations on being a dad. I haven't seen you since you had your kids, so congratulations on that. Leave us with this. What's the most unexpected thing about being a dad that you absolutely love right now?
That I absolutely love. Well, honestly, right now it's not all that hard because she can't move anywhere and she sleeps all the time. But there are certain times where she makes little evolutionary leaps that just are like so exciting because they happen when you're not expecting. Like the first time she smiles at you, and then yesterday she, you know, you do tummy time for like 10 minutes over the course of a day where you put her on her stomach and she works on lifting her head up to get neck control and getting her trunk off the ground, and that's like the big first step. And yesterday, I had her on my chest doing that, and previously she'd only been able to kind of slightly turn her head to the other side and shaking the whole time, but yesterday she just popped right up, just like you would see a normal baby do right before they go crawling around. And it was like so surprising and exciting just to see her like develop like that in front of your eyes. So that's probably been the most rewarding thing so far.
Well, I'm really happy for you, and I hope to see you around the ballpark sometime soon. And I wish you the best of luck covering the game. You can check out Zach Buchanan in theathletic.com. He covers the Diamondbacks, but also writes about baseball in general, check him out, theathletic.com. It's worth a subscription.
Awesome. Thanks, Martin. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.